And we are Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the Checkup with Dr. Chanda. Listen, I'm so excited and so happy for you to be here. Nicola, I see you, girl, checking in. Thank you so much for doing that. Listen, you guys know how we start the show. I want you to put in the comment section how you are feeling. Let me know using an emoji. You can utilize words. And you know why we do this. We want to build that emotional awareness and our emotional identification skills. How can we know what we're feeling if we don't even know how to label it? How can we communicate to others what we're feeling if we haven't been able to identify them? So let's build those skills up. Hey, Tanya, girl, thanks for tuning in. Let me know where you guys are tuning in from. So make sure you are putting your mood in the comment section. You can put an emoji, whatever it is that is on your heart that you want to share. Let us know. Okay. In the meantime, I also want you to share this live. I believe that this information is going to be so beneficial to so many people who are watching this. Why? Because today we're talking about anxiety, and anxiety is one of the most common diagnoses in America. So I have a special guest here. And so yeah, I see somebody has a headache. I hope you feel better. Somebody's feeling exhausted. So many different emotions that I see here. And I think we all can empathize with that, because especially in this era of the pandemic and virtual learning and virtual schooling, virtual work, I think we've all experienced some sort of exhaustion during this season. Somebody's watching from San Diego. I love it. Thank you all for tuning in and continue to share this live. So again, we are talking about anxiety. And like I said, anxiety is one of the most common diagnoses in America. So we want to make sure that you guys are well equipped with the information and knowledge pertaining to this specific diagnosis so that we know how to treat it. You guys know what to do when you start to experience it. So today I have my good friend here with me, who is Jason Phillips, and Jason Phillips will be joining me. So come on through, Jason.
Hey, what's up, Dr. Chanda? What's going on, everybody?
How are you?
I'm good. It's Friday, so thank you for having me on the show. Super excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited for your yes. I know. So we recently did a live together on your Instagram page, and I'm just excited about this conversation that we're about to have with our viewers, because this is a hot topic right now.
It is.
Yes. All right. So first things first, let us know where you're tuning in from. Well, not you're tuning in, but where you're talking from, where our viewers can find you, what you do. Who is Jason Phillips?
Okay. Yep. So I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at J Phillips MSW. That's J Phillips with 2 L's MSW. And my website is pnpcoach.com. That's for peace and prosperity. And I'm a licensed therapist and certified life coach.
I love it, Jason. Jason, you have all the knowledge pertaining to anxiety. I have a lot of especially Black clients who reach out to me, who ask me, like, I think you're great, but I'm looking for a Black male therapist. And you're like one of the first people who pop up into my head when they ask for those types of referrals, because it's so needed, right? So I want us to start the conversation simply by just checking in and asking you, like, what are some of the most common symptoms of anxiety that you're seeing in people, especially in this era of the pandemic?
So that's a great question. I would say a couple of the common themes would be, one, overthinking. So we feel like we just can't, we always second guessing ourselves, and we have these racing thoughts. Another symptom is shallow breathing. So feeling like we can't catch our breath, especially now because we're wearing a mask all the time, that just kind of compounds the anxiety. And then lastly is lack of confidence. And I say that to say that when we have anxiety, a lot of times we're unsure about the future. We're unsure about what's going to happen. So again, those three things are overthinking, having the racing thoughts,
wow,
the lack of confidence, and the trouble breathing. Those would be the most common ones I see.
Wow. So Jason, you just gonna come into the show the first 5 minutes and just start dropping gems like that? Okay, I see how we're gonna do today. So listen, if you guys you're taking from this information, I want you to do me a favor and drop some fire emojis because Jason is dropping all the knowledge today. So you identified some really significant things there because oftentimes when we think about anxiety, the first thing that we go to is just like the physical symptoms, like that racing heart and, the hands trembling and the hyperventilation, like all those different things are the first thing that comes to mind. But then we neglect that there are cognitive symptoms or thought-based symptoms that come with anxiety. So Jason, would you mind expounding a bit on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so a lot of times with anxiety, we can't really stay right in the present, like in the moment. We're already thinking way ahead. So what that looks like for us a lot of times is thinking the worst thing is going to happen. So we're already we call it catastrophizing, but that's a very just big word for saying we think the worst thing is going to happen.
Yeah.
So what I always advise people to do is slow down, which means slowing down your breathing, slowing down, what's going on in your environment, and really tuning in to what's happening right here and right now. Once you do that, then you can kind of pinpoint certain thoughts and get a feel of, hey, why am I so anxious? What certain thoughts are reoccurring for me? So that's what I always advise people to do. Slow down so we can stay right here in the present moment.
Yeah, that's so good because, like we said before, like there's a direct connection between the thoughts that we're having, the mood that we're experiencing in those bodily symptoms. So it sounds like what you're saying is once we slow down, take note of the thoughts that we're having, then we might see our symptoms subside in terms of like the physical stuff that we're seeing, like because they're all connected. Is that what you're saying, Jason?
It is, and also too, we can find that a lot of things that we worry a whole lot about, they are not as bad as we make it seem. So when
Wow.
we start to, overthink and catastrophize and make the worst out of a situation, when we really break it down, the stuff that we worry about, it's not that it's not valid, but it's usually not as bad as we put it out there to be.
Yeah. I often say to my clients, the brain's function is to protect us. So it's
Mm-hmm.
automatically sometimes it's going to jump to the worst case scenario. And so even though, it's a slight chance that you may get in a car accident if you go to the grocery store in your car, but is it helpful to think about? Like asking yourself
Right.
those questions, like, is it realistic? Is it valid? And is it helpful? Like all those are great questions to ask, especially when you're trying to get your brain to slow down. I don't know about you, Jason, but even since the pandemic, like I've experienced some anxiety.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've experienced it because there's so many things, like there's so many demands put on us. Again, we're trying to figure out if we can stay safe with the pandemic. What can we do? What can we not do? And I think that in itself, like we're all experiencing it. Like you probably get way more phone calls and DMs, and just being able to keep up and also take care of yourself too. So I definitely have experienced way more anxiety than in the past.
Yeah, that's so good. So now I want to shift gears a little bit. This
Mm-hmm.
is a question that I often get. I know you often get it because I had answered this when I was on your platform a few days ago. But a common question that we receive as therapists is anxiety a bad thing? Because I have anxiety, does that mean that I have a diagnosis? Should I be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder or social anxiety disorder or all these other anxiety disorders? Like, can you help us a little bit with that?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. I always say anxiety is not like good or bad. It can go one way or the other, but just in general, anxiety helps us prepare. When you think about taking a test or giving a presentation, you may, the anxiety, that adrenaline, it helps you make sure your slides are good. Make sure you study enough. It becomes, I guess, a bad thing when we can't sleep, when we can't function,
Right.
when we don't like to be around people because we're so anxious. Like if I said, "Hey, Dr. Chanda, you know what? I can't do it. I'm feeling too anxious," as opposed to going through it and letting the experience just happen.
Mhm. Yeah, so good. So it sounds like what you're saying is when we have those experiences of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
then avoidance shouldn't be something that we revert to.
No,
Is that
not.
okay?
So,
I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Talk about that a bit.
yeah, so I love really talking about avoidance because avoidance is a lot of times our go-to
Yes.
because it's a short-term fix. Avoidance does work in the beginning,
Mhm.
However, for long-term success, avoidance is the absolute worst thing you can do when it comes to anxiety, because then it reinforces that whatever it is we're worried about, whatever it is we're concerned about, that says that, oh, I had to avoid because I couldn't do it. But when you actually show up and go through it with anxiety or without, then you get a chance to teach yourself that you can do these things, and now you have evidence to show it.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is, if I'm nervous about an upcoming speaking engagement, if I really don't want to do it, I shouldn't cancel at the last minute. I should actually. Is that what you're? That's what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
so I would say prepare as much as you can. Again, because we do feel more comfortable when we're more prepared. But to
That's
go through it, if you are nervous, that's cool. I mean, we go live all the time. There's definitely times where we're going to be nervous, but we have to still do it. And we don't focus it on us. We focus on the education and us being helpful.
Exactly. That's such great advice. Listen, guys, so if you are watching this and you have a question, make sure you are putting them in the comment section so that we can answer your questions. So we'll start answering questions in a few minutes. In the meantime, Jason, I'm wondering if you could help us out a little bit with some coping skills, like some takeaways that our viewers can take away from this conversation in terms of how to cope with anxiety. What are things that they can do?
Okay, some very, very basic things. One, I always say, even though anxiety, we think about it from an emotional standpoint, a cognitive standpoint, it does manifest itself physically as well. So
Mhm.
the first thing, make sure you're getting the proper exercise. Like, and that doesn't have to mean you spending hours in the gym, but just like walking, a little bit of cardio, strength training, like the exercise really does help lower our overall anxiety. So exercise is one. The second one is journaling. Why is journaling helpful? Because again, when you journal, you can actually see your thoughts on paper, and it gives you a chance to flush it out as opposed to it just staying up here. So journaling, exercise, and then lastly, talking about it. Talk to a friend or talk to somebody you trust, because then that helps you put it into perspective with somebody who is a safe person. So number one, exercise. Number two, journal. And then number three, talk to somebody who you can trust to be open with.
I love that. All great strategies. And listen, guys, for the viewers out there, these aren't just strategies that we're just telling you guys to use. These are strategies that we use ourselves.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm a firm advocate for working out when I feel anxious, or, doing all those different things are helpful even for therapists. So we wouldn't tell you guys to do something if we didn't know that it worked. Jason, I know we were talking about the thoughts too, right? So we were talking about how one of the hallmark components of anxiety is just having that catastrophic thinking, or thinking about the worst case scenario. I'm wondering, are there any coping strategies that you can think of that might help our listeners or our viewers in that area?
Yeah, I would say, to be very frank, like something that we can do, it kind of stems from journaling. When you write down what you're thinking, then it allows you to pinpoint the thought. It
Mhm.
asks, and then you can ask yourself, will this matter, 1 year from now? Will it matter 5 years from now? Is this actually going to happen? Because a lot of times with anxiety, it's not just a thought, it's a question. Like, what if this happens? What if I stumble over my words? What if people laugh at me? What if I fail? And when you can write that down and ask yourself these questions, then you can see, like, it's not so bad after all.
I love it. I love it. So it sounds like we're disproving our thoughts by writing them down and kind of like analyzing the evidence and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
100%. Okay. Okay. Jason, I'm wondering, is there some sort of correlation between someone experiencing anxiety who might also experience depression? Like, do they commonly occur, or could you
Yeah.
provide some clarification? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I always say, like, anxiety and depression tend to be brother and sister. And that means, like, they usually go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Sometimes one is more prominent, like we feel really anxious, or we may know that we get really depressed, but we don't always pinpoint, because, like, we're not all therapists. We can't diagnose ourselves, but we can get so anxious. For instance, like if you are nervous about being around crowds or public speaking or speaking up, that now you start to avoid. After you avoid, you don't go around anybody, so now you're isolating, and then the isolation leads to depression. So even though you don't think like, oh, I'm so depressed, but the anxiety gets so bad that it just spills over into a depressive mood.
That sounds like a cycle happening.
Yeah.
If I feed into the anxiety, then I might experience some depressive symptoms, and then it just exacerbates things. And wow, that's some good stuff you're dropping. So I said we have a question from Rye Barney Porter. So this person said, I've been trying to incorporate meditation, thank you, into my daily rituals. What are some of your favorite, or who are some of your favorite people to follow that provide mindfulness exercises? Do you have anybody who might come to mind?
Offhand, I mean, a lot of therapists that I follow on social media, like Dr. Ebony online, she does some mindfulness exercises. Dr. D, the MFT. And then also, if you don't know these people or you're not on Instagram, you can really you can YouTube mindfulness exercises, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, I know we all know about YouTube, but I have done that myself, because again, they just walk us through whether it's a breathing exercise, whether it's paying attention to certain thoughts. And again, one more thing I would say about mindfulness, like, start slow. So if it's only 2 minutes or 3 minutes, build up to 15 minutes, but don't try to go at it all at once. It's work.
Yes. No, that's a really great point, because oftentimes what happens is, if we have a client or somebody who might go, just in the deep end into mindfulness and meditation strategies, and then they feel defeated because, I can't focus, I can't pay attention for that long, and then they say, mindfulness and meditation, it doesn't work. But it's a practice. It's something that you have to build your skill at, right? So like Jason is saying, like, the more you do it, the easier it gets. You'll be able to really put your full awareness and attention to that strategy that you're doing. So like Jason said, I don't know if anybody comes to mind on Instagram. I just can't think of the names right now, but on YouTube, there are several individuals who you can just search, mindfulness strategies or meditation strategies, where you can just find like breathing exercises, mindful eating exercises, like all these different strategies are available to you on YouTube. And also, I know the Liberate app, that's a mindfulness app, a mobile application for people of color, and it specifically helps you with mindfulness and meditation skills. So if that's a skill that you're hoping to hone, I would encourage you to download that app as well. In addition to that, I know we have another question. So, and I'm sure this is a lot of people can relate to this. So why me? What makes me different that I'm suffering from anxiety and someone else isn't? So I'll tackle after you do, Jason.
So yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question. This is the thing when it comes to anxiety, because I experience anxiety different from Dr. Chanda. Dr. Chanda experiences different from Tanya. It's hard to really, we shouldn't compare. So even though it may look like somebody is doing just fine, there was a well-known therapist on our live the other day who said, hey, I experience anxiety. And she's been on TV and all of that. So my point is that it's not that you are different, because we're all different. And you just don't know if somebody's suffering from anxiety or not. So we can compare how we're doing, but really, we're not doing an accurate comparison, because we're not in that person's mind, body, or nothing like that.
Exactly. And so, we empathize with you. And also, like Jason said, like we're all different and we're going to experience it differently. And just to normalize it, something I said earlier in the show, like we all have it. We all have some level of anxiety, right? And so, like Jason was saying, anxiety is healthy. It helps us to prepare. It keeps us safe. It keeps us from doing things that'll get us in trouble later, right? So, anxiety is absolutely healthy, but if it's at the point, sis, to where you feel like it's debilitating and it's impacting your daily functioning, I can't go to work, I can't go to school, I can't take care of my children, I can't show up in relationships in the ways in which I used to show up, that's when it might be time to seek out professional assistance to help us with coping with these different things. So I love that question, because it definitely, I think a lot of people can relate to it. Gwen, I believe Gwen Cole is the name. So this person said, can anxiety also be hereditary? Can that be biological? Can it be passed down from one generation to the next? we could talk about this all day, Jason.
I know. I would absolutely
Yes.
1000% say yes. And the reason I say yes is because we, our parents, our mother, our father, our grandparents, they all experience anxiety, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just now starting to have like real open dialogues about anxiety. Like when I was growing up, I didn't even know, like we heard the term, but I couldn't say, oh yeah, I experienced anxiety. Or we knew
Right.
we got nervous, or we knew we didn't go certain places, or we knew we didn't speak up in certain situations, and we knew there were certain things that we just didn't do. And there may be things that our parents didn't do, but we never coined it as anxiety the way we do now.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a
I
great
know.
question.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's such a great question, and also to go back to the last question, some of us will experience anxiety more than others because of our life experiences. So if
Mm,
I was picked
okay.
on, growing up a lot, and if I've been in, had different traumatic experiences,
Mhm.
and Dr. Shonda hasn't, right? So that, or the way we interpret the experience is different. She may be fine meeting new people and dating, where because I was in an abusive relationship, I'm very nervous about that. I don't
Mhm.
want anybody to know where I live or know my real number. And that's because of my experiences. And that's what makes us different.
Yes. Great example. I love that. Even what you were saying about like as you growing up, we may not have had the language to put to it. I know as a kid, for me, like I just would say I'm sick, like my stomach hurt. The whole time I didn't know it was anxiety. I didn't know, when I would go to school, like that was literally
Yeah.
anxiety, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
I feel like, we're finally getting to a place to where we can have these conversations openly and it's becoming more normalized. But like you said, it can definitely be passed down. People do have biological predispositions to anxiety. That's a thing. And like you said, there can also be situational factors that might cause the biological predisposition to be expressed in some ways. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So great question. Great question. Okay. So Shanetta said, can one develop bipolar disorder? So I know, so this isn't necessarily related to anxiety, but it's still a great question, and we can go ahead and tackle that.
I would just say yes. I mean, so again, you can have genetic factors that can predispose you to bipolar disorder, and then certain traumatic events can trigger that. So maybe again, something happens in your early teens or late teens, and after that experience, you find yourself not being able to regulate your mood the same. You find yourself more impulsive. But when you go back and look at it, like when did it start? It started right after you lost your job and lost your house, or it started right after you lost a parent who you were super close to, and that's how it can be triggered. Dr. China, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, I feel as though there are life situations that can occur that do cause these different biological predispositions to be expressed. And so when we talk about bipolar disorder, I think it's always important to kind of give context and like to really define it, because people often have a misconception of what it is.
Oh yeah,
So
huge.
oftentimes, yeah. So oftentimes people say like, oh, because I'm happy one minute and sad the next minute, I'm bipolar. And that's not the case. So bipolar disorder is more so having unstable mood. So let's say, for instance, one is depressed for, let's say, a week or a little bit longer. And then after that phase, they go into a state of just normalcy or an expansive mood or a really manic mood, to where they're just really manic, very energetic. Like that is bipolar disorder. And that, in fact, can be, again, it's a high, I believe the hereditary rates is like 50%, but don't quote me, but it's somewhere around that range. But that can be biologically predisposed. But again, there are protective factors out there that can protect one from actually expressing these different disorders behaviorally, and that might prevent like a diagnosis. So yeah, great question. We could be here all day talking about that though.
I'm glad you put that into context too,
Yeah.
because with bipolar disorder too, as Dr. Shonda was mentioning, you have to look at the impact on how you are functioning, right? And I
Yes.
know it could be a long conversation, but I just want to say, just because you're happy one minute and sad the next, that does not constitute a disorder diagnosis.
That
Right?
part.
We're talking about like reckless spending, reckless sexual behavior,
Yes.
violent. I mean, it's a whole host of things, but it's not just because you're had and sappy, mad and happy. Like that's all of us at some point. We have a bad day,
Right.
and then it turns good. So
Yeah. All dependent on that person. I love it. Tracy Davis made a good point. So cultural secrecy is why it was never discussed in African American homes. Everything stays in house. Now we are becoming more open to it. 100%, Tracy. 100%. I know that was something we had kind of talked about a little bit during the live that we had discussed, but there is a cultural sense of just, keeping everything in the house, not exposing the dirty laundry, right? And so
yeah.
in the African American community, when one does express like feeling depressed or going to a therapist or talking about their concerns outside of their home, it's stigmatized. They think that it's, people are going to look down on them, or people are going to see them as, less than a man or less than a woman, or I'm no longer considered that strong black man or strong black woman or whatever that means, right? And so I feel like now we're definitely coming into a place to where we are able to endorse the fact that, yes, I am, a person, I'm still a woman and I struggle. I'm still a man, I'm still strong and I struggle with depression. Like all these two different truths can coexist at the same time, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. What were you going to say, Jason?
Well, just the same. I was in the barbershop earlier, and I overheard a gentleman saying, like, it was a public conversation, but he was saying he struggled with the loss of his wife, and he kind of remarried pretty quickly, and people judged him. But I also heard him say, "Look, I was lonely. I went to therapy. My therapist said it was okay. I'm almost 70 years old." So the takeaway from that is an older black male openly saying that he went to therapy. Like that was not the barbershop talk 10 years ago, even
Right.
like 5 years ago.
Exactly.
And nobody judged or like
Yeah.
stopped him, nothing like that.
I think that just speaks to the evolution of our racial group, like us as
Mhm.
black people being able to acknowledge struggle, right? Because at one point, acknowledging struggle, and this goes back to, we could, again, one of those conversations we could be here all day. But if we think back to that era of like slavery, and when we did go through adverse situations and we were expected to continue to work, we were expected to continue to produce, it was ingrained in us to continue to work through hardship, to not complain, right? It was ingrained in us to continue to persevere, and to adopt that strong black person mentality, when in fact those types of mentalities are a direct product of white supremacy. So in order
Yeah.
for us to dismantle that, to dismantle the systems, we have to in ourselves get to a place where we can acknowledge, I'm experiencing like mental health challenges, I'm experiencing depression, I'm experiencing, a loss from my husband or wife or whoever, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that you brought up that conversation that was happening in the barbershop, because
Right.
barbershop, all right, that's a whole nother therapeutic office in itself. I love that conversation happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was dope. It was
Yeah,
so dope.
yeah, amazing. All right, y'all. So we got time for one more question if anybody has it. Yes, eliminating the secrecy and acknowledging struggle is so healthy. I love this. We no longer need to survive, but live. Jessica, that is a whole you can preach that on a Sunday morning. Yes, we no longer survive, but we are living. I love that. There's a difference between the two. What would you say to that, Jason?
It is. I mean, when we don't speak up about what we're going through, it makes us feel like we're the only person going through it. When in actuality, a lot of us are struggling with anxiety, depression, but we just don't say anything. And we feel like, well, let me get over it. Let me work a little bit harder, because that's what we're taught to do. That's what our parents have done. They did it. But what all did they give up by doing it?
Exactly.
They gave up a lot, a lot.
And are they healthy? That's
Exactly. No, they suffered through it.
right. And like one thing we had previously talked about, like when we internalize emotions, when we're not coping with anxiety specifically, so many different things can happen to our bodies physically,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I
So
mean,
we go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the ulcers, the
Yes.
chronic pain, the cancer,
Mm-hmm.
all these things that happen to us because we're not taking care of ourselves mentally and emotionally. So
Yes.
the fact that we're having these conversations, I was super excited to be here because we just have to continue to normalize talking about anxiety and not feeling like something's wrong with us or me or you because we experience anxiety.
That's so good. I think that's the main takeaway here, Jason. Listen,
Yeah.
audience, I hope y'all were taking notes because there was definitely some gems dropped. We talked about some different coping strategies that you can start to use. Jason, let us know where we can find you. What are some things you have coming up?
Yeah, they can find me right here on Facebook and again Instagram. That's J Phillips MSW. And as far as things coming up, so I just completed the Wear Confidence webinar with Venus on how to show up with confidence and style and how you dress. So you can catch the replay of that. And then I'm dropping my podcast, so I gotta get you on there. So stay tuned for the podcast, Peace and Prosperity Podcast. I'm looking forward to that.
I love that. I love that. And I know you had mentioned the website earlier. What was that website?
Oh, my website, pnpcoach.com. Yep, the letters PNP Coach.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, viewers, for watching the Checkup with the Black Doctor org. I am Dr. Chanda, your host. You guys can follow me on Instagram as well as on Facebook at paging.dr.chanda. You guys can shop my merch. I thought this hoodie was very fitting for the day. We have PTSD too. So
I gotta get mine.
I got you. I got you. So you can shop my apparel at www.mindsoftheculture.org. And while you're there, you can also download the mobile app. It's called Minds of the Culture. You can find a Black therapist. You can find coping skills. You can find facts about Black mental health. So go ahead and download that. It's in the App Store and on Google Play. Again, thank you so much for watching the Checkup. We are signing out. Catch you next Friday at 3 o'clock.